All right, we're live. What's good, everybody? Take it easy back here. Continuing the NBA offseason videos that we got going. Let's jump right into it. I wanted to cover the apron teams last video. Went a little long, so we didn't get to Denver. So let's just hop right into the Nuggets here. So the Nuggets are 10 million over the first apron. They only got 2.5 million in second apron space. And they only got 10 players on a contract, which means right now they are over the second apron team. When they get up to 14 players, they have to re-sign Peyton Watson. They also played Spencer Jones. I think Spencer Jones started the last couple games in the playoffs, if not all of them. Tim Hardaway was on a minimum last year, so he's a free agent. They have their first round pick this year in the 26th overall and the 49th pick. That's $3 million, so just the draft pick alone puts them over the second apron. So their top priority is to re-sign Peyton Watson. So we have to kind of look at the roster and take a long, hard look at it, because this team lost in the first round this year. So they have to really make some stance changes. Yeah. What? Yeah, because I was going to try to do a video while everyone was sleeping. Yeah. We'll see if we can get any further in this. The dog's already interrupted me, so we'll see how far we get. So going back to this, the Nuggets got to just kind of look at themselves in the mirror. They got to reevaluate here because they got to adjust their window, essentially. So the two main guys you look at is, do you think about trading Jamal Murray? Do you think about trading Aaron Gordon? You probably don't want to trade Jokic at this point. I don't think he wants to be traded, so there's no reason to move on from him. And you're always going to be a playoff team with Jokic. We've seen him drag much lesser teams to the playoffs than this. You coming in, Zelda? But you don't want to be a second apron team when you're this far away from the title. Christian Braun's extension kicks in here, so this is the first of 5 years. He really underdelivered last year. Valanciunas, I'm not sure if this will tell me how much is guaranteed. Let's see how much of this 10 million is guaranteed. Only 2 million of it. Looks like my screen froze, so when I jump off this page, I'll have to reset that. But for now, we're good. Valanciunas wanted to leave, go to Europe last year. The Nuggets talked him into staying. They'd probably be happy to let him walk, so that would clear $8 million, which they would still be over the first apron, but they can maybe skirt under the second apron without making a drastic change. Really, what their offseason is going to be about is anyone going to be interested in Aaron Gordon? Aaron Gordon's pretty much injury prone at this point in his career, so I'm not sure how much value he would have, even though he is really good when he plays. Or they try Jamal Murray and just kind of reset the team that way. Peyton Watson's probably going to cost at least about like the mid-level exception, so we're talking at least $15 million a year. So you want to probably clear at least $20 million in salary. So let's see if we can come up with any Jamal Murray or Aaron Gordon trades. So we will bring up the trade machine. And I will have to redo the screen capture here. I thought I would be able to get away with doing this video while everyone is asleep, but that does not appear to be the case. So we'll try to get through as much of this as we can. All right, so we got the trade machine here, and it's moving on the screen. Good. So we want the 26-27 year. We want the Nuggets. So who would be interested in Jamal Murray? We could go back to exploring Atlanta, just like we did for Donovan Mitchell. It would probably be pretty similar teams to who would be interested in Donovan Mitchell. Because Murray is also in his prime. He's 29 years old right now. The Heat would probably be interested. Who else potentially would be interested? Houston. I liked the Houston package for Donovan Mitchell. But I think Atlanta would be more attractive here. You could also potentially do Phoenix. I think Atlanta would be the most attractive here because Atlanta has the lowest payroll, which means they could take money on, clear some money for the Nuggets. The Nuggets also have a couple bad contracts that they could potentially move along with Murray. So let's see what all Atlanta could take on. So we sent them Zeke Naji along with Jamal Murray. That's $57 million going out. They could send back. You probably would want to start with Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Ricochet, and Kuminga. That's probably a little too high. So maybe. So let's see. So they're exceeding the allowable income by 20, but I don't think that's fully accurate. Let's see. What's Atlanta's payroll at right now, just out of curiosity? Atlanta's only at 153, so they're not really in danger of approaching the apron, really, but they have to make the trade work. Can't tell if that's a bird or a dog. It must be the birds. My chair is shrinking. Everything's working against me right now. All right, so let's do Kuminga. Let's throw Kuminga in there. And then maybe we can throw this Valanciunas contract back at them. Oh, they have an exception. So they could take that Valanciunas contract through the exception. That clears $15 million. That's probably not quite as much as they would like to clear. So let's see. With Kuminga, you probably want to reroute Kuminga or Cameron Johnson. So let's rework this with Brooklyn in it, just so we can clear a little extra money here. So we're going to send Kuminga to Brooklyn, Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Ricochet to Denver. We probably could get Day'Ron Sharpe in this too, to Denver, to work on their everlasting needs to get a backup center, because just nothing seems to ever work out for the Nuggets. So in this scenario, we're clearing $15 million. And we probably want to find some draft picks we can attach to this as well. Let's get the search bar out of there, because you guys don't need that. So what can Atlanta also throw? Atlanta could potentially throw the 8th pick in this draft. That's pretty attractive. They could also throw the 23. Brooklyn's getting Kuminga. They could maybe throw 30. So let's throw Denver 33 and 23. And then maybe this lesser of Milwaukee, New Orleans pick. That's a pretty decent one, though. I wonder if Atlanta would rather throw this 28. I think they would rather throw. All right, so then the Nuggets. Yeah, they can keep that one too, just to work balancing the roster. All right, so the Atlanta Hawks are going to acquire Jamal Murray in this scenario here. They're going to send out Jonathan Kuminga, who's going to go into the Nets cap space. The Nets are going to send out the 33rd pick for Kuminga to bring him in. And the Nuggets will get Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Zachary Richeche, Day'Ron Sharpe, the 23rd pick, the 33rd pick, and the Atlanta 2028 first round pick, which involves pick swaps with Cleveland and Utah as well. They get the lesser of that or their own pick. So that could maybe be a slight move up. It wouldn't be substantial for Atlanta, most likely. But if they're better than Cleveland in 2 years, which seems feasible, I guess it's going to Denver. So even if it is the Atlanta pick, it's probably going to be a late teens, early 20s pick, which isn't terrible. So for the Nuggets, you would now have Jokic, Aaron Gordon, Cam Johnson, Christian Braun, and you probably would start Nickeil as your starting point guard given the current roster construction. Oh, I didn't get out as the Zeke Naji contract. I wonder if I can send that to Brooklyn still. Okay, we're going to make Brooklyn take that Zeke Naji contract. And they can keep the 33rd pick for their troubles there. They're just going to take on the Zeke Naji contract for the price of getting Kuminga. So Denver's not going to get the 33rd pick, but they're going to get out that Zeke Naji contract finally, which clears $23 million. So clearing $23 million just to go back to Denver's cap sheet. That would get us all the way $11 million under the tax. So plenty of room to bring back Peyton Watson, who maybe he starts over Cam Johnson. Let's say he starts over Cam Johnson. So we would start Jokic, Aaron Gordon, Peyton Watson, Christian Braun, Nickeil Alexander-Walker. You'd have Day'Ron Sharpe, Zachary Richeche, Cam Johnson off the bench, along with Julian Strawther. You'd still have Day'Ron Holmes as your third string center. Jalen Pickett, you would have your mid-level exception as a team under the tax. Or you would exceed the tax once you get Peyton Watson. You bring back Spencer Jones. He's a restricted free agent. You could bring in like a $6 million player. Probably would just be Tim Hardaway again. So really you're adding 2 rotation players to downgrade Jamal Murray to Nickeil Alexander-Walker. Not ideal. And then you also have the 23rd pick in this year's draft along with your own pick, which is the 26th. You also got the 49. That player is most likely going to be on a 2-way. But you would bring 2 rookies into the fold here. You probably stay under the first apron. You would exceed the tax, but you probably get float under the first apron with this team. Easily clear the second apron window. Atlanta gets Jamal Murray to kind of be their 1A, 1B with Jalen Johnson. Probably not a perfect scenario, but you got Dyson Daniels in the backcourt with him. You can still potentially bring back CJ McCollum. You'd still have Kispert. It'd be a little light in depth, but Atlanta's actually clearing money in this trade, even though they are sending out 3 players, so they have roster spots to fill. So they would be active in free agency. They would still have the 8th overall pick to add to the roster as well. Let's see if we can come up with a Aaron Gordon trade. Aaron Gordon is a bit tricky. You probably just want to straight up salary dump him almost. So who would be interested in an Aaron Gordon in this scenario? That is a tricky question. Maybe Phoenix. Let's see if we can get... We're going to include Sacramento. I like to do Sacramento salary dumps with Memphis. I think that makes the most sense for both those teams. And we're talking about Denver. So this would be a 4-team trade, a little complicated here. But we're going to try to send Aaron Gordon to Phoenix. We'll send Zeke Naji to Sacramento. We'll try to clear both those salaries here in this scenario. I like to send Ja Morant to the Kings. It feels very Kings-like, where they're swapping Ja Morant for Zach LaVine to save a little bit of money. Memphis gets out of the years in that scenario. And so you're bringing in Aaron Gordon. You probably want to. You probably still have to just move Grayson Allen and Royce O'Neal. So let's send Royce O'Neal. Let's send Grayson Allen to Denver. We'll send them both to Denver just to see what we're looking at here. Memphis needs to receive something from Denver or Phoenix. Phoenix needs to send something. We'll just send this to Memphis right now just to see what we're looking at here. This trade currently fails. The Kings taking on too much money here. So we will send him to Phoenix. That makes this legal. Or do you just send... Maybe they just eat Zeke Naji. That's probably cleaner. Let's make the Suns eat Zeke Naji. That's going to make it like that is the problem. Alright, so 49th pick can also go to Memphis right now. This still fails. Suns are just a smidge high. So they like that guy. We'll just send Haysmith to Memphis. Doesn't like that. Okay. What about this guy? Alright, well, we will keep Zeke Naji going to Sacramento because I can't finagle it otherwise here. Alright, so we haven't got quite into picks yet here. So the Nuggets are sending out Aaron Gordon and Zeke Naji's contract. They're getting back Grayson Allen and Royce O'Neal. Clears $10 million. So that more or less gets them under the first apron to give them the wiggle room to sign Peyton Watson. The Grizzlies swap John Morant for Zach LaVine. They take on $6 million more this year, about $7 million more. They get a second round pick for their troubles. They also get out of the next year of John Morant. So they save actual dollars, but they take on money in this season. The Suns are just giving up a mid-second round pick, Grayson Allen and Royce O'Neal's contract to get Aaron Gordon. They have to take on Devin Carter just to make the money work. They're taking on 8.1. They're at 186 right now, so let's just peek at them real quick. They're at 11 players. They're doing a straight 2 for 2, so they're staying at 11 players. They got plenty of room. So that threatens to push them into the tax, but that's the only real threat that they face. And they add Aaron Gordon. So Phoenix now, they'd have Devin Booker, Jalen Green, Dylan Brooks, Aaron Gordon, and then Kaman Malaluch. If he's ready to start at center, they would still have Ryan Dunn, Osa Oego, and then they have to sign their free agents is what's tricky. So Mark Williams, Colin Gillespie, and Jordan Goodwin are all free agents. So they would definitely go over the tax to bring their guys back. They took on money so they couldn't exceed the first apron. I don't think they would really be a threat of that. But they would become a tax team, which might be a little tricky. I don't know that they would really want to give up assets just to get Aaron Gordon in this scenario. It's a shame I couldn't make Zeke Naji work over Devin Carter. They don't have any use for Devin Carter. Zeke Naji could potentially be in their big rotation. And then the Kings also need to shed money. They would be the next team we talk about here. We might just glaze over them with this trade. This trade largely accomplishes what we want to accomplish anyway. where they need to shed a little bit of money. All right, so I think that covers Denver. So let's just jump right into the Kings. The Kings right now are the 5th highest payroll slated for the NBA at the moment. They are currently over the first apron. The major wrinkle there is DeMar DeRozan's contract is only guaranteed for $10 million, so they can just waive DeMar DeRozan and make essentially $16 million in cap space. That would put them at 10 players on the roster, and they have about $12 million in tax space. 8.2 of which would go to the 7th overall pick. They also have the 34th, and 45th pick. So all 3 of those players could reasonably make the roster, which would get you to 13 players after waiving DeMar DeRozan. You were like the 2nd or 3rd worst team in the league last year. So there's no excuse to pay the tax when you're that bad, that far away. I like the idea of trading Zach LaVine for Ja Morant. I think it accomplishes what both teams need with Ja Morant's value so low. It gets the Kings a franchise player, someone they can pair with Sabonis, put on the billboard and stuff. Also helps them get under the tax. So in that trade we just did, they shed $4.5 million, bringing in Ja Morant and Zeke Naji. So that keeps them at 11 players. We would waive DeMar DeRozan, which would put us about $16 million under the tax. So then we could sign our 3 players that we draft. That's roughly about $12 million. So we'd have about $4 million to play with to sign 1 player. Let's see, who are our free agents? No one we're really in love with here. Precious Achiuwa is only 27. So Dylan Cardwell and Maxime Reynaud, and Nick Clifford for that matter, were all pretty decent rookies for you last year. You could also decline the Killian Hayes contract, give yourself a little bit more wiggle room if you wanted to do so there. So you're a little light in guards. We don't know who they're drafting. They're rumored to like Acuff, who's a point guard. So I don't think we really have a big position of need. $4 million, you could, that slightly exceeds the minimum. In the 2nd round picks, you can maybe sign for a little lower, save yourself $1.5 to $2 million there. So you can maybe get up to like a $6 million player. So you would have Ja, Sabonis, DeAndre Hunter, Keegan Murray, Malik Monk, Nick Clifford, Reynaud, Cardwell. So that's pretty much a rotation already. 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, that's your 8-man rotation. You'd have Zeke Naji. You'd have the 8th overall pick. So maybe you would just try to get a Killian Hayes-esque player for that $6 million. Someone that was like a high draft pick, but it's flamed out, doesn't have much of a market. I think that is honestly what the Kings would probably do. I think that makes sense if you can do that LaVine, Ja Morant trade. That's really all you need to do, along with waiving DeMar. You could also try to trade DeMar. I just don't think he's going to have much value at 37 years old. He's basically washed, even though he can still get a bucket. The next highest payroll is the Knicks. Let's take a look at the Knicks. I haven't really looked at them. They're in the finals right now. They have 9 players. Okay, they're a little more cash strapped than I realized. They only have 9 players under contract, and they have $3.5 million in first apron room. They have the 24th and 31st pick. Both those players will make the roster. That's about 5.5. My screen froze again. That's about $5.5 million, which puts you over the first apron. That gets you to 11 players. Mitchell Robinson is a free agent. So you'd have about $14 million under the second apron at that point. Landry Shamet, Jordan Clarkson are also free agents. I'm trying to think who else is playing you. Ariel Hakpoti, I think, did play for them in the regular season. Hasn't played for them in the playoffs. But you have a couple free agents that you could bring back on minimums. So the real thing you would be facing here is potentially risking Mitchell Robinson, or potentially having to sign him and go slightly into the second apron. But the second apron penalties only hit if you finish the season at the over the second apron. They do apply immediately, so it would restrict you in trades in theory, unless you shed enough money to get under the apron in said trade. But I think you just run it back. The Knicks are kind of one of the least interesting teams to talk about. They made the finals, so they got where they wanted to be this year. And they could potentially run it back and stay under the second apron depending on what the Mitchell Robinson contract is. Next we have the Pelicans. I gotta refresh my screen for that. So 1 second there. Where are we at? 25 minutes. That's with the run-ins and everything. So we're not really at 25 minutes of content, but the video is 26 minutes long. All right, the Pelicans. They have $4.6 million in tax space. They have 14 players under contract, and they have the 58th pick. No real impending free agents, obviously, with 14 players under contract. So they don't really need to do anything. They changed their coach. That's probably their big move. They would love to get off Jordan Poole. And you could maybe even take on a little bit money for Jordan Poole. They technically don't have to add a player. You can just field 14 players. You can go up to 15. I think Sadiq Bey would have a little bit of trade capital. I don't think Jordan Hawkins does at $7 million. You could also decline Kevon Looney and give yourself about $12 million in tax space, which opens up nearly the whole mid-level exception. Wow, I didn't see Chase was commenting here. What's up, Chase? I know they want to dump Jordan Poole. So let's see. What can we do to dump Jordan Poole is the question. That's just a tricky question. I don't really have an answer for it. So what's another gross contract that's got more years on it is probably what you're looking at here. That they can actually fit in the cap. That's really hard because no one's really getting paid that much for multiple years other than like Ja. And I don't think Ja would really make a whole lot of sense because you have fears. But I don't know what else you could do. So let's play around with the Ja trade just to see the chaos. Where did my comments go? Ah, well, I was seeing Chase's comments and now they're just gone. All right. Jordan Poole. We could throw Hawkins in here too. So in this scenario, you're taking on the year of Ja Morant for $44 million next year. So you're making future use problem. They also could potentially dump Looney in this deal. It wouldn't really matter. They could also just waive Looney, so it doesn't really matter. Would the Grizzlies want Looney is the question. So they probably actually would want Looney because it looks like Zach Edey is their only center on the roster. They don't have draft picks to trade is the problem here. So you don't really have a sweetener. Is this more attractive to Memphis than the Zach LaVine trade? Then just becomes the question. And I think with Looney, it probably is. Because even though you don't care about Jordan Poole, You don't really care about Zach LaVine either. And you could probably just waive Jordan Poole if you're the Grizzlies. I don't think they would want Hawkins back. But it's basically a wash if you take Hawkins out. You're taking on $100,000. So maybe that would make sense for New Orleans. Ja Morant and Zion is a very funny pairing. You'd have DeJounte Murray in there as well. And you wouldn't have a center on this roster, which is what they did last year. But with Jamal Mosley, you probably do want an actual center. You probably don't want to just run with center Zion, Yves Missi, and Derek Queen as your only bigs. So let's see if we can come up with anything else here. Oh, there's the chat. I don't know why it disappeared before. Trade fears, huh? Interesting. Yeah, we could play with that Gobert trade that I came up with. I showed it to the guys in the Discord. I haven't done it on the video. So this was another one of my Wolves ideas. I don't remember if I did it on the Wolves video. I think I did actually. It would just be a straight up player swap here. Except the Wolves can't really afford to take on money. Is one of the tricky ones here. But I think you can make it work if you put Dante in the deal. This is the wrong year. So this is a floor raiser for the Pelicans. It's a ceiling raiser for the Wolves. I think this would work. If you put Dante in the deal, send Sadiq Bey back to Minnesota. You gotta change the salaries so it doesn't confuse the system here. I wasn't looking at this. You guys didn't get to see it, but so you could do Zion, DeJounte Murray, Sadiq Bey for Rudy Gobert, Julius Randle, and Dante DiVincenzo's contract. Basically a wash financially. The Wolves accomplish everything they want here. They get a potential number 2 to pair with Ant and Zion. They had the best training staff in the league this year, so you hope with that you keep Zion healthy and DeJounte Murray for that matter. DeJounte becomes your backcourt pairing that you're also looking for. You're hoping he can kind of return to his form since being a Spur, which he didn't really have in Atlanta or New Orleans, but he's shown flashes of it. Sadiq Bey is a very interesting role player that's never really played on a contender, but he's shown a lot of tenacity in his career. All three of those guys would play, which is nice because you're adding a role player with Dante potentially being out for the year. And then the Pelicans get their defensive force with Rudy Gobert to pair with Jamal Mosley as the coach. Gives you a front court pairing long term with Derek Queen, but you also add a multi-time all-star, all-NBA player in Julius Randle that could probably start over Queen if need be. Dante, probably not coming back this year, but he might play in March, which if you're flirting with being a play-in team, that's a nice little wrinkle there too. So you would start Rudy Gobert, Julius Randle, Herb Jones, Trey Murphy, and probably Fears. You're still a little light at the point guard position, but you do have that 15th roster spot. You could bring in a veteran like a Tyus Jones or something. Stay under the tax and get a veteran to pair with Fears. Off the bench, you would really just have Queen, Jordan Poole. You could start at point guard. I don't think anyone would be happy with that. I know Chase wouldn't be happy with that. You still have Yves Missi off the bench, so you'd have Missi and Gobert, which is a pretty nice defensive pairing. And then you got the minimum guys there at the end of the bench as well. I don't like that disappears on me when I click out of OBS. All right, where are we at? 34 minutes. Let's do one more team. Oh, we'll do two more teams because the Pacers are boring and don't need to do anything, but we'll look at the Pacers. The Pacers come into this offseason with 14 players under contract, no draft picks because they lost it in the Zubac trade, and they're $240,000 under the tax. So they don't have to do anything. Any move would put them over the tax. They do have a couple of non-guaranteed players here at the end of the bench, so they could swap Micah Potter, Quentin Jackson, Cam Jones for a different minimum player. But that's about it. Nothing huge there. Let's see if these guys have any guaranteed money on their contracts. I'm assuming no. $275,000. That's basically nothing. Cam Jones, probably something similar. Nothing guaranteed. So you could finagle along the edges if you wanted, maybe bring in a veteran. Halliburton should be back this year, so you would start Halliburton, Siakam, Zubac, Nebhard, and Neesmith. You'd have Obi Toppin, McConnell, Jarvis Walker, Ben Shepherd, Jay Huff off the bench, Johnny Furphy. So you probably would want to swap some of those minimum guys around. But I think because you can field the team under the tax, they wouldn't exceed the tax. And then finally, let's end on the Raptors. The Raptors are a little bit better financially than I thought they were. They got 7.9 in tax space, 13 players under contract, a lot of minimums that they can finagle there at the end of the bench, but they're all pretty good. They have the 19th pick, which is $4.2 million, so that leaves 3.8 for a 15th player. That wouldn't be the 50th pick. It could technically be the 50th pick, though. So similar to kind of the Pelicans, except they are in the East. They're a little closer to contention, where they could just keep the team as is, add a 15th player, stay under the tax, call it a day. As a Wolves fan, there's been a lot of inklings about potentially swapping Julius Randle for Emmanuel quickly. I think the Raptors would have to trade probably the 19th pick along with it. Maybe you get the 28th pick back in like a pick swap. Quickly is just a big downgrade from Julius Randle, although he's younger. I think his contract is worse. For all of Julius's flaws, he is still like an all-star level player, which Emmanuel quickly is not. This last year, the RJ Barrett contract. So you kind of got to decide what you want to do with him long term. He won't command this salary on the next contract, though. So you could just keep him as a Canadian, get him probably closer to like $20 million a year, and use those savings elsewhere. You extended Jakob Poeltl for some reason to a massive extension. So he's pretty tough to trade. You could maybe trade those three guys to the Wolves for Rudy and Julius. Start Rudy, Julius, Ingram, Scotty Barnes, Jamal Shed. You'd probably just have to give up a fair amount of draft capital because the Wolves would be taking back two bad contracts in that trade. That's what's tricky about the Raptors is he's not only making $32.5 million, Chase, he's making it for the next 3 years. And then Jakob Poeltl's contract is even worse. We can look at that one too, because they signed him to a massive extension. So he is making $20 million this year, and then the next 3 years he's making essentially $30 million a year. So you would be taking on like $110 million of Jakob Poeltl if you trade for him. Quickly is at a flat 32.5 for the next 3 years. They signed it to a 5-year contract where he's making that much every year. And they're both essentially role players. So very ugly. So I think you're attaching draft capital to either if you're trading them. I just think that's hard. I don't know who would really be interested. Grady Dick fell out of the rotation for them. That's a $7 million contract. They could try to shop that. But you'd just be trading a role player for a role player. You could do like Grady Dick for Sadiq Bey kind of thing, just because we just looked at Sadiq Bey. You save 500,000, so the savings don't really matter, but you get a larger player because your bench is fairly small. Although you did trade for Tracy Jackson Davis at the trade deadline. So it's tricky. It depends how much you want to just run it back and how much you want to just kind of stay where you were. It's like a middle of the pack Eastern team. You could also potentially try to swap Ingram for another player, but I just don't think the Brandon Ingram contract is all that enticing to other people. He's 40 million this year, 41 next year, so it's not a long contract at least. But we just saw Brandon Ingram get traded last trade deadline, and the Toronto was the only team interested in him, so I don't think there'd be much interest there either. So I'm trying not to do every trade as the Wolves, but that's the team I see the most rumors about. So let's just explore the Julius Randle trade, because I don't really have another idea for what to do with Quickly or Podol. So I think this would just be a straight up trade. Minnesota saves a little bit of money, and then you just have to kick in some draft capital. So you do the 19th pick. You probably do this the day of the draft, and you throw in like a lottery protected 28. The screen froze again. Damn it. So you do something smallish here where you trade in draft capital, but so you'd send Quickly to the Wolves. They'd have to take on the next 2 years of that. So you get one less year, Julius Randle. But he upgrades your ceiling probably. The Wolves kind of used him as your default point guard this year. So even though it's kind of an awkward fit with Scotty Barnes and Brandon Ingram all in the starting front court at the same time, I think you could make it work. It's a higher upside and a more tradable contract, because then next year Julius Randle would be on a $35 million expiring, along with Brandon Ingram's $41 million expiring. But it is going to cost you the 19th pick in this draft and probably a future protected. I did a lottery protected 2028. It could also be the 27 if it's a draft day trade. The trade machine is just not going to let me do it at this point. All right, so we are now through just about 10 teams. Yeah, we're through 10 teams, so we'll call it here. Next video, we'll start looking at some playoff teams. We'll look at Boston and Houston. Maybe we'll do Philadelphia in there as well. All right, thanks, guys. Thanks for joining me live, Chase. See you next time. Bye.